Gran Turismo 2 was, for most of us, our first real exposure to simulation. I've taken it one step further and I have built my Gran Turismo 2 dream car. I'm Lawrence, welcome to the channel. So that was a pretty dramatic intro. This isn't going to be a super cinematic video or whatever. I want to tell you guys the story about this car. I bought this car about 7 years ago, and some people in my Discord kind of know the story. I bought it drunk the night after a wedding. My friends Dennis and Michelle did the most amazing wedding in a town called Milltown Malbay in County Clare here in Ireland. At the time, the drift scene was completely rife. I was actually involved in organising drift events. I owned a track drift car. So drifting was really kind of, I guess, after the collapse of 2008, the prices of cars had come right down again. So cars were really, Japanese cars were extremely affordable. A little bit of background on that is we have our steering wheel on the right hand side of the car as well. So in Japan, they drive on the left as well. So in Ireland, we're in the fortunate position that we can import Japanese cars pretty freely. Any age doesn't really matter. I know there are Americans absolutely cursing at the screen right now. So during the 90s, Japan wanted to stimulate its own market by introducing what we now know as an MOT or an NCT or a car test or Rego or whatever you want to call it. A car test that basically proves how roadworthy a car is. Now in Japan, there were massive incentives for people to upgrade their cars after as little as 3 years. So during the 90s and early noughties, we got an insane amount of Japanese cars imported into Ireland. At the time, they were still quite new, they were still quite expensive. But as time went on, the prices just kept dropping and dropping and dropping. At one stage in Ireland, you could buy a GTR Skyline or 32 for about 6,000 or 7,000 euro, which is about less than $10,000 American. If we knew then what we know now, absolutely mad. Anyways, back to my story. We were at a wedding in Milltown Malbay in County Clare in Ireland, and it was a beautiful weekend, beautifully sunny. I was there with my now wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. We stayed in a bed and breakfast. So the morning after the wedding, it was about probably 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, we decided to check out of our bed and breakfast. Now, this is where the fun part started, because in the bed and breakfast, the actual machine for taking our cash was broken, so I couldn't pay by card and I had no cash on me. So we had to go into the town itself to get money out of an ATM. So on the way in, it was like a long straight road. I remember it quite clearly. At the side of the road, I spotted a Nissan Silvia S13, and I was completely like blown away by it, because you just didn't see them regularly on the road and you never saw them parked just at the side of the road. So I was driving really slowly looking at it, and my wife was like, why are you looking at that old shitbox? Because it didn't look like much. I'll put a picture up on the screen. It really didn't look like much of a car, but I was completely fixated on it. I went to the ATM, got my money out, got back in the car. I was like, oh man, that's such a cool car, and you could probably buy it for cheap. So we were driving back, and I was driving my wife's BMW at the time, and I was going super slow, and I was looking at it, and I spotted that all the tax, NCT, insurance, everything was in date. This car was in use. Whatever happened that day, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just my wife's hangover, but she said some fatal words. She said, Lawrence, just find out who owns it and have a chat with them. She did not have a clue that meanwhile, I was saving up money. I had money in my bank account that I was saving for an engagement ring for her. That was the exact moment that I knew, like I already knew she was the one, but when she said that, I was like, this is happening. So I went and asked around. It was a Sunday morning, nothing was open. I went and asked around, and eventually, it's a small community. Eventually I found out that the owner was actually living nearby, found out his address, and I knocked on the door. I said, "Your Silvia, is it for sale?" Luck would have it, he said, yes, this car is for sale. Now, he was a smoker, but he didn't smoke in the car didn't smell, and he allowed me to test drive it. Now, at the time, it was black, it was non-turbo, it had an open diff, and it had standard suspension. So it was about as standard and untouched as could be, but it did have about 180,000 kilometers on it, which was high mileage for a car like this at the time. So I took it for a test drive, I drove it down the road, and there wasn't a knock or a rattle. It was super quiet. It even had the standard exhaust still. So when it came to brass tacks, when I got out and spoke to him, I was completely amazed when he told me, you can buy this for 2,000, I think it was 2,150 euro was the final price that we agreed on. And I went straight onto my online banking. Luckily, I had my online banking set up. I didn't have my little card reader that you need to put in the code, so it was a bit of a disaster. I was trying to see how could I get this money to this guy. This guy trusted me, so I left him with like 800 euro. I think that was the maximum transaction that I could do at the time. I left him with 800 euro, but he actually gave me the book for the car, and we signed the book for the car, and he said he'd send it away. So very trusting people in Ireland. I'd only given him 8,000, but I told him that I'd have the rest of the money with him before the end of the day, or else he could just call the cops on me that I stole the car. So no problem, did that. We made it home just about. My wife was absolutely sickened that she had to do the 2.5 hour journey back home, driving by herself. She was hoping to just sleep in the passenger seat, but she had to drive the car that we went there in, and I got to drive this car home. So this was 2012 or 2013, I can't exactly remember when. Geez, that's 10 years ago. Man, I'm getting old. So in the meantime, I spent a shit ton of money on this car, and it's no longer a standard suspension. It's no longer got a standard exhaust. It's no longer an open diff, and it's no longer naturally aspirated. So yeah, in the meantime, I've put a big massive turbo on it. I've got, you know, new injectors, AFM, I've got a Power FC on it. It's a Garrett GT2871 or ball bearing turbo. I've got a Cusco diff in it. Yeah, lots of mods. Now I know what you're thinking. Why haven't you done a video on your car before? And lots of people have been pestering me ever since they found out in my Discord that I drive this car. They've been pestering me, they've been saying, you should do a video on it. I kind of felt reserved about it because firstly, it has nothing to do with the channel, as in like the channel didn't even pay for it. I had this car before I started my channel, but I also don't want to be a show off. I've kind of given in to peer pressure here now, and look, it is a cool car. I do really love it, and I think it's, you know, cool to be able to share it with you. I do feel slightly weird about doing a video about my car, but I guess I'll get over it. Jimmy does it. Except my big disclaimer is that I paid for this with my normal day job, which is a lot less exciting than YouTube. So yeah, that's kind of my disclaimer. I don't even know why I'm disclosing that. It's a cool, back to the car. Let's talk about the car. So I know loads of you came here for turbo noises, so let's just give it a little bit of noise. Oh yes! Oh my god. Every single time. I get to drive this car every day. I daily drive this car, but my god, that sound is just, now, and SR20s are not the most beautiful sounding engine in the world. They really are not. But my god, that goes like stink. That got me up to 160 kilometers an hour there at the top of third gear, I think it was, or did I get into fourth? I don't even know. Yeah, stuff moves fast. I'm stuck behind a van now again, but yeah, stuff moves fast at that speed. This is a private road, by the way. Could you ever tire of that noise? I'm gonna have to turn it around here. Too far away from home now. Yes, boy. It fucking rips. It is an absolutely savage car. It's only running about 300 horsepower, but I'm running 15-inch wheels with tiny little tires. So this thing is an absolute blast to drive. I get excited every time I sit into it. Every time I drive it, it's just, I don't know. I feel like a little kid. I feel like 12-year-old me sitting there playing Gran Turismo 2 again. I had the first Gran Turismo. I was into that. I loved it. But Gran Turismo 2 captured my imagination because it had like 600 cars or something completely bonkers. It had different spec models of different cars like Primeras and Sunnies and Skylines and like all the Toyotas, and everything was just completely bonkers. So I fell completely head over heels in love with that. I must also state that I come from a place which is where I grew up. The closest racetrack was about, at the time, probably 5 hours drive to get to Mondello Park here in Ireland, and I knew nothing about racing. I had Toka games and all that kind of stuff, so all I knew about racing was what I occasionally saw on Eurosport, and we had this just a major advantage, and I took it for granted when I was young, but we lived in the heart of rally country in Ireland. We lived on just where the Ring of Kerry meets the Ring of Beara, in a place called Lorach. The most famous stage there is probably Healy Pass. You've also got the Cod's Head stage just nearby. So it's the heart of rally country. And when it was rally weekend, I didn't even know that you could buy a program. My parents were not into rally at all. So I didn't know that you could buy, and know when the cars were going to come. But when it was rally weekend, I used to go up to the top of our road. It was probably about 250, 300 meters away from our house. And I used to sit there for hours and hours and hours. Like, I would bring snacks. I would sit there for 8, maybe 10 hours a day waiting for the rally traffic. And even when the rally traffic subsided, I would stay again just in case they passed again. It was, for me, such a thrill. And that is where I first saw Nissan Silvias and Nissan Skylines. And that is when at that exact time, I was playing Gran Turismo, and the one car in my garage that I just would not sell was my Nissan Silvia S13. It was green two-tone. It was on BBS wheels at the time, the gold BBS wheels. I did buy Equips. I did have Equips on this for a while, but I actually prefer it with the standard understated look. It was a crazy time, but that made me fall in love with it. And I used to say to my parents, one day I'm going to own a car like that. And now I own a car like that, which is just completely bonkers. And I hope that the passion and the backstory is kind of coming across to you, because I do feel weird about making this video. It does feel a little bit self-righteous, a little bit egotistical, but a lot of people want to know more about this car. So that's kind of the history of the car. I really don't want to make this video too long because I feel quite self-conscious. In fact, most people who do YouTube content like doing content on something and not necessarily about themselves. They like the distraction to be somewhere else. So in the meantime, over the last couple of years, I've owned lots of other cars, S14s, R33s. I've owned loads and loads of S13s. This one was my second S13, so I already had my drift car. This was my second S13, and I've had it now almost 10 years. And since I started daily driving this car, I've been daily driving S-bodies and R-bodies and S14s, and I've been tremendously lucky that I haven't had a massive work commute, and I've also been lucky that my wife's car has always been there, and she's always driven a kind of a family style car. So whenever it came to collecting parts or driving to track days, I could just use her car. So that was extremely fortunate. So then 2016 came along, and we were expecting our first kid, and I always had dreams of modifying this car, modifying it because it still in 2016 it still had a non-turbo engine in it, and I had bought a 2JZ with clutch, gearbox, all that stuff, and I was going to put a 2JZ from a Mark IV Supra into this car. Then as time grew near, and we realized that there was a baby on the way, and I had about 20 grand of parts sitting there, and I hadn't even started the conversion yet. I said, this is kind of crazy. I saw people around me, friends of mine, doing 2J conversions in S13s, and they just couldn't make them road legal. They were fun cars, they were cool, they couldn't keep the temperatures down, they just couldn't live with them as a daily driver, and I wanted a daily driver. So I thought to myself, well, I have so much fun in my drift car, and that has a standard SR20 turbo in it. Why don't I just swap for an SR20 turbo? So I ended up swapping the non-turbo engine that was in this car straight swapping it for an sr20 det. It had a cracked water pump housing, so I got that changed when I was doing the swap. Of course, I'm not that super technical when it comes to cars, so I had saved up money. I had loads and loads of parts for this conversion, did all the research myself, and I gave all the parts to Stone Motorsport, who are in Kildare. I just got a scan. I just got a scan from someone. So I got all the parts up to Stone Motorsport up in Kildare, and they did all the engine work, the tuning, the body work, all that. I've been daily driving this for 4 years now. This is my 4th year after the restoration that I'm daily driving this. I've been to 2 car shows in that time. So I've barely done anything with the car from a scene point of view, but I've driven it every single day to the shops, to work, all that. In that time, since I got it done up, I've done 35,000 kilometers in it. So that's a fair amount of mileage for a car like this. So that's what, about 8,000 or 9,000 kilometers a year, which is fine, you know, short commute, and I have my wife's car whenever I need it. I want to keep this a fairly simple video, so I'm not going to show you the gauges and all that kind of stuff. I will give you guys a quick tour of the interior in a little while. This is the first time I'm using a camera mount inside the car. I've never had a camera mount for inside the car. I had one for a roll cage for my track car, but obviously this doesn't have a roll cage. It's extremely OEM inside. It's got a rare uncracked dash. I've got a standard steering wheel at the moment. I did have my NRG system in here with my dish Nardi, and I used to take that in and out. Before the car test, I swapped it into this, and I actually quite like this. It's not the best driving position. I would prefer for the steering wheel to be back a bit and that I could sit back a bit more, but it's not the end of the world, and I like that OEM look. I've got S15 seats in the front. I've got Cuyar 180SX seats in the back. It's got a non-smoker ashtray, got a Nismo gear knob. What else? Yeah, the exhaust is a HKS high power silent. Hopefully this sound isn't peaking and I don't have to do this video all over again. That would suck, because it's taken me so long to actually do this video. I really don't want that to happen. But yeah, it's just a super cool car. Absolutely just, I'm delighted with it. I absolutely love it. I can't see myself ever selling this car because it's just such a cool, it's, in my eyes, it's a work of art. I know that, you know, a lot of people prefer 32 Skylines or whatever. So at the time that I did the conversion on this car in 2017, I could have just not spent the money on this car, could have left this as a non-turbo, I could have left it as a just bog standard 120 brake horsepower manual car that it was at the time. It needed body work and all that kind of stuff. It was rusting and all that kind of stuff. I could have just left it like that, and I could have actually bought an R32 Skyline at the time, which, you know, I don't regret. R32 Skylines right now are like 50 grand, 60 grand or whatever. I don't think I could live with an R32 Skyline GTR every single day of the week. Maybe you can, I don't know, maybe at standard power or whatever, but you'd be too tempted to get massive power out of it. 300 horsepower out of an SR20 is more than enough for me. And I think it's somewhat conservative, because you guys saw it pulls quite hard, especially with these small wheels and stuff, and it grips up really nicely. It's a great car. I don't run it super low. I run it at a fairly kind of, I guess, resto mod type height. It's not OEM height, because that was like monster truck height, but it is a lot lower than it would have been OEM, but it's nowhere near as low as many cars that you would see. Now, the benefit of that is that it's super practical. So I can take it into towns and cities and all that kind of stuff, go over speed bumps, I can go into multi-story car parks, and these are all things that are actually super important to me. I know they're probably not important to everybody who has a lifestyler car like this, but for me, practicality probably took me the longest to work out. I had big wheels, I had small wheels, I had it super low, I had it super high, I had exhaust that scraped the ground and all that kind of stuff, and I'm finally in a configuration now that I just absolutely love. I adore this configuration, and I don't think I'll ever change it, because it's just, yeah, it's just nice. It's very pleasant to use, very pleasant to experience like this. So that has been a brief look at my car. I hope you enjoyed it. Chat to you later.